Hello there! Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm going to take a final look, for now, at The Mandalorian Season 3. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter and Hive at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Plus, Force Ghost Conversations is now live on Patreon. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everyone, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. And in this episode, I'm basically going to give some final ramblings, rantings, opinions, ideas, anything lingering that I wanted to either say again, clarify, or just talk about in regards to The Mandalorian Season 3, which, spoiler alert, I loved. I thought it was great. I really appreciated and enjoyed what we got this season. I thought it was a really great addition to the Star Wars canon. And of course, we'll get to that a bit later in the episode, of course, because we have some housekeeping to get through here. So let's start with some Cloud City gossip this week. And full disclosure to everybody, I'm going to pull the back curtain a little bit here for this episode. I'm recording it a little bit earlier than what I usually do in the week, so apologies if any major news announcements come out. We will cover those in our subsequent episode the following week, so be sure to don't give me too much grief if something isn't covered here. We'll get to it next time, just because of scheduling purposes and all that stuff. So basically, there's two big things I wanted to highlight this week, and the first is Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the brand new video game from EA, is now, or it is out by the time that this episode comes out on Sunday, which is awesome. I hope that you've picked up your copy, or if you had it pre-ordered, that it just automatically downloaded for Friday. I'm hearing great things so far. I've seen that a lot of places have given it very good reviews and ratings on their scale systems. I have absolutely no doubt that that is 100% correct. I think that everything I've seen so far from the game proves that fact, and I can't wait to play it. So I know I'm doing a little bit quick travel here. I'm doing some homework, of course, closing out grad school. I know I've got some social obligations that I must do, and I'm definitely going to carve out some time in order to play the game and give it the time and space that it deserves. And of course, we'll probably talk about it, and probably most likely, let's not say most likely, it's definitely going to be talked about on the podcast here. I'll do some thoughts on it in an episode coming soon whenever I'm able to play through it all, hopefully. And perhaps we'll do a play and talk. I know that was that was a successful episode that we did a while back, maybe a year ago at this point, about the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga game, which also is a really great game. If you haven't picked up that one yet, be sure to do so. I'm sure May 4th there'll be a ton of deals in regards to Star Wars games, so don't sleep on that one. So we'll definitely have to do something in that regards for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I can't wait to play it. I'm excited for it entirely. I hope you are too. The other big news announcement is, of course, Friday and the subsequent week, Return of the Jedi will be returning to select theaters across the United States in honor of the 40th anniversary. I have seen it at my local Regal, which I'm very thankful for. It's going to be in the RPX theater, and I'm definitely going to a showing. I don't know how many, though. May have to talk to Mrs. Force Ghost Conversations to see how many we're doing. I know at least one for sure is on the docket, but maybe I can finagle two. I don't know, folks. We'll have to see how it goes and if the price is ultimately right on that one. But be sure to, look up your local movie theater or Fandango to see where Return of the Jedi is playing in your neck of the woods, so that you can keep making sure you see this pivotal Star Wars film on the big screen the way it was meant to be seen, to appreciate the story, the characters, the sound design. I think it'd be great to see it in the theater. I can't wait to have this experience myself. I have seen it with a live orchestra, but this will be the first time that I've seen any of the original trilogy as it was intended to be seen on the big screen that I remember. I've seen the special editions before on the big screen, but I don't remember those. So this is a first for me. I'm very excited to have this experience, and I hope that some of you are able to partake in that as well. So go check out your local theater to see if you can get tickets and go see a showing or two. Be a lot of fun. Take your friends, take your kids, take your spouses, your significant others, your partners, etc. Have a great time. Enjoy some Star Wars on the big screen. Now, of course, we also have one more bit of housekeeping, of course. For those of you that may know, we have a Patreon here at Forest Ghost Conversations, and anybody that supports at the $3 tier and higher monthly have the ability to send in questions to be answered on the podcast. So if you want to have the opportunity to do so, as well as at various tiers, you get access to several other things related to Forest Ghost Conversations. So if you want to join the Patreon, there's a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered to see which one is right for you. Our friend Rural Farm Boy has sent in a question to be asked in this episode, so I'm going to read it out loud here and then respond accordingly. So he says, "Alrighty, here's a cue. I've sent as emails to our other pods friends. First time I ever wrote it. Heard it said many a time, and some of our friends like to pick on Imperial stormtroopers, saying things like they couldn't hit the broadside of a bantha. I know it's also an Axe Woves quote. I want to know how. Just how does the Galactic Empire keep an iron grip on the galaxy for nearly 30 years with what folks call incompetent soldiers? We've seen in many places just how competent they are." I think that's a great question. I think there's two parts to that question, my friend. One is, if you believe that they are incompetent soldiers, how do they keep the galaxy together with an iron grip? And I think that's a fair point. Perhaps there's just so many of them, and the reputation just wasn't so widely known as our characters know. But you gotta imagine, I would think, for the average layperson in a planet, for example, let's say like Mapuzo or something like that. For example, like if you're a farmer, you probably don't want to go messing around, and you don't want to tempt fate to see if that stormtrooper is one that doesn't have great accuracy, whatnot. Like we're of course attuned to it because we see oftentimes the protagonist characters that we have in our shows are ones that are fighting stormtroopers, and I think that's just a nature of storytelling that we see where we need some cannon fodder in a way for our heroes to overcome and to grow and to be tested at various points during their character journeys. So I think that has something to do with it. But then there's the other side as well, whereas actually I fall under, which is I don't actually think that they are incompetent. Sure, again, there are some instances where there is stormtroopers that aren't the most accurate, right? I think the Obi-Wan Kenobi line where in A New Hope, where he says these you know, these are very precise blast points, and some must be Imperial stormtroopers, right? Like the death knell that he gave to them, basically. I hope I paraphrase that line, of course, but to the extent Obi-Wan Kenobi says that in A New Hope. Um, so clearly there are competent soldiers. We just on screen have maybe not seen some of the most put together ones, but across the Star Wars galaxy and the expanded universe and comics and books, etc., you see definitely examples of stormtroopers pulling their weight. Certainly Inferno Squad is another great example of a group that was very well trained and versed in combat, etc. I think modern Star Wars has also done a great job of putting that together. Aside from like perhaps Rebels, which maybe because that was more kid friendly, but I would say like definitely a Rogue One. I think Andor for sure. Am I missing anything else? I think Obi-Wan Kenobi, of course. Definitely The Mandalorian showcases better examples, I think, of the competency of Imperial Stormtroopers. So I wouldn't go completely doubting them on that one. I think they definitely have earned their place as, having a tight grip on the galaxy. They didn't get it just by being incompetent, right? They fought their way through to the galaxy and probably earned a reputation as being some very solid troopers. And as time when it goes on, perhaps maybe that's where it came, as they were just churning it, put folks up to the battlefield and all that stuff, and letting that transgress. So that's kind of where I stand on that front. But thank you for sending in that question, Royal Farm Boy. Will be sure to answer any others that may arise throughout the month for you here. And again, for those of you at home, if you want to submit your own question to be read on the podcast and answered, of course, too, be sure to check out our Patreon and subscribe at least at the $3 a month tier. Of course, we have two others beyond that where you get to subscribe, where you get to answer or submit multiple questions, as well as get access to other things such as exclusive podcast episodes and the ability to share other stories on the podcast as well. So with that, folks, we'll be back on the other side of this very short break to discuss some final thoughts on The Mandalorian Season 3. Stay tuned. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the main portion of our new episode here. And, this is going to be a casual, relaxing look back at The Mandalorian Season 3. Just some final ramblings, some rantings, if you will, perhaps. Things that I maybe didn't address or want to address again, just to reiterate a point throughout all of Season 3. I did this for, I believe, maybe Andor or Willow. I definitely did it for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett. Maybe I didn't have time to do those podcasts. Maybe that's worth a future episode to talk about that stuff. I don't know. We'll get to maybe that at some point. But this is where I get that space to do this for The Mandalorian. And where I want to start is how thankful I am that we got some really great themes in The Mandalorian in this season specifically. And the first that I really think of is the importance of tradition, but not being hindered by tradition. Being able to grow beyond tradition. What really made me think of that is I was reflecting, of course, on the loss of the Darksaber. And it was a hard moment for me. I'll be honest. I love the Darksaber. I think I still want to buy it from Galaxy's Edge. The legacy lightsaber to have on display. I think I still want it. And it hurts because that's something that I've built up in my head as something that's like a very important relic. I love the myth and the lore behind it, etc. But frankly, it was the idea of the Darksaber and what it represented brought the Mandalorians down. The fact that someone had to wield it, and the only person that wielded it is the one that is worthy enough to be the ruler of Mandalore, and the archaic concept of it having to be won in combat. Right? Din Djarin couldn't wait to get rid of that thing when it came to the loophole. It just goes to show that, it didn't really matter in the end. What really mattered was Bo-Katan's strength, her resilience, and her nature of honor, where she was able to walk both worlds respectfully. Respectfully. That's a big key here, right? It's okay to have traditions, right? It's okay to choose to wear a helmet, to walk the way in that sense, or to not wear a helmet and to, have it on and off, depending on if you're in battle or not. That's okay too. We showed that these two groups, these warring factions that had been warring factions for some time now, can come together. They can operate peacefully. They can coexist together. They don't have to be at odds with each other. Communication, understanding, and a belief in yourself and in the you know in the quality of the folk around you can really overcome just about anything. And it allows them to have these great traditions, right? You got to see at the end of season 3 here with Ragnar being bathed in the mines of Mandalore. You got to see literally Bo-Katan and Din Djarin doing that too. But it's not for everybody, and that's okay. These are big things. Like if you want to follow these certain dogmatic rules, do it. It's absolutely fine. But if you don't want to and you still want to dip your toes into some aspects or you believe in a certain way, that's fine too. Just be respectful to each other. I think that was really big. The Armor clearly saw this in midway through the season. And the Armor was frankly one of the biggest champions of Bo-Katan. And then in return, Bo-Katan championed them back. Right? They didn't degrade them. They each fought for Mandalore and died for Mandalore. I thought it was really poetic, and I love that they're back on this home planet that's theirs again. They can restart the Forge again, and again, another piece of Mandalorian culture that they're rebringing back again. They can farm on the land. They realize it's not toxic. It's not a poisonous wasteland. They can create memories again here. They can respect the past. They can honor each other. They can stay true to their core beliefs and systems, but they don't have to degrade each other just because of that. Especially when they're respectful, right? It's not like the the ones that wear helmets, right? We'll just call them Children of the Watch if that's the sect that they still want to be called at this point. If they are saying like, you're heathens and all that stuff, you're horrible, you're the worst, right? No, they're not saying that at all. They're not saying it at all. Of course, there was some animosity at first when they had to break ground together, if you will. But they got there. They got to that point, and they were able to really accomplish an astounding feat, defeating Moff Gideon, his Phase 2 Dark Troopers, and whatever clones that he was trying to amass there on his secret base here on Mandalore amidst this Shadow Council and things that are going on larger than Moff Gideon in the galaxy. And what I love here is that, and this goes to my next point in this kind of talking here, is the idea of the assurance and the sense of self that Din Djarin and Din Djarin has. I love that about him in this season, right? I think people I've heard the podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on the Mandalorian, of course, throughout the many weeks of this season, and especially over this last week here. And I'm hearing a lot of folks saying that they're just confused. They don't think that Din Djarin has a character arc, etc. And they're using that as critiques of the show, and that's fine if they want to have that. That's entirely up to them. I guess where I fall under that domain is I don't necessarily think that characters need to have arcs. A film that is one of my favorites is Avengers Infinity War, and I don't think that most of the characters have arcs in that movie. And I think it's okay. It's still a fantastic movie. Sometimes event things just happen, and that's the way it is, right? You don't necessarily have to go from point A to point B and have a transformational journey a part of it, right? To me, if I'm arguing in the case that there was something for Din Djarin, is that there were the temptations for him, right? And he chose to walk the path that he wanted to. He's more assured with his sense of self, and he's confident in his decisions and choices that he makes. This is something that happens to all of us, right? Eventually, you're going to get to a point in your life where you've made that transformative leap in your character arc, your journey. You've gone from point A to point B, and then to stay at point B, right? You don't necessarily have to go from B to C yet. To stay at B, that's where you get tested. You get challenged. Your beliefs get, you have to reaffirm yourself as a person at point B, if you're following me on this analogy here. And that's where Din Djarin is at. He took his helmet off. He's an apostate at the beginning of this season. And of course, very quickly on, he he does his task. He goes to the mines of Mandalore. He falls into the living waters there. He is rebaptized and reborn again under his creed, his code. And of course, all throughout the season again, he's tempted with, perhaps this isn't, I guess that's what I'm saying is that he's tempted with, the ideals of Bo-Katan. She's saying like it's lost, it's stupid. Why are you doing this? And he inspires her. He goes, and then frankly, that's a very big point. There is he inspires Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan, is definitely a converted person, if you will, to following the concepts of the way, and to not belittle or begrudge the Children of the Watch for their concepts of what it means to be a Mandalorian. They may have differing viewpoints, but it's okay. We get back to that original point that I made. Something else that about that too is again he sees these other Mandalorian sects, right? We go out into the galaxy. He's tempted to um, by Grief Karga to find his plot of land to be the Marshal of Navarro to stay with Grogu here. And of course, he could do that, but that would be selfish of him. He's trying to reclaim his home planet once more, or at least give a home for his people who are scattered across the galaxy in various ways that are literally hiding from these big kaiju-like monsters that are attacking them and living in a place that's literally the worst home you could imagine, right? You have to fear walking out into the depths of anywhere in that cave. I mean, frankly, even the cave's not too safe at the end of the day. He could have stepped away from that, but he realized that there's a larger force at work here. So I love that about him and his character, that he had these options to do something different, to fight against the concepts and the ideals that were being put in front of him, but he chose to be himself, to walk the way that he wants to do, and that's fine. And he was frankly celebrated for it, if you ask me. Bo-Katan was all on board with it. And that inspired her to be a great leader at the end of the day. So if you follow the causality here, the Mandalorian was pivotal this season by inspiring others. He was constantly the first one to stand up when we need volunteers for something. I will go with Bo-Katan to do this. I will go help Bo-Katan out here. I will be one of the folks that land first wave on Mandalore, right? He says he's inspired by Bo-Katan. He loves her honor and her loyalty and all that stuff. These are the things that, make me follow you as a leader. But if you look at it, he also inspired her to be the leader that she was, because she was sitting on that throne. We all seen the pose at this point, just nonchalantly nihilistic about everything. She thought she was defeated, and the power of Din Djarin's belief in himself and of his beliefs inspired her again to get up and retake the mantle of her planet. This is incredible, folks. I really loved all those aspects of The Mandalorian, and I thought that they were just really pivotal aspects to what the show brought to it. And of course, Grogu is now going to go on his journey. I'm very excited for where they're going with it in season 4 here, whenever that does come. We have no information about it to this point. You got to imagine they're tying in what would have been, quote unquote, the Rangers of the New Republic show into this season 4, and that's okay. When they announced something at an Investors Day in 2020, several years before, things can change. Yeah, you don't have to be locked into exact title, locked into a viewpoint, etc. A lot of stuff can happen. They rewrite, they change things, they do something on set, and they're like, "Oh, wow, this is cool. Let's do this way." That's okay. That's okay. Very excited to see where that will go. I also think it helps that maybe Din Djarin, this is his way to being introduced into the larger story that they're going with here, right? Tying in with Ahsoka, tying in with the Book of Boba Fett, and of course tying in with whatever Skeleton Crew is going to produce whenever we see those later this year. And honestly, it's smart, because then it's going to tie into these greater threads that are going to culminate into this brand new movie that Dave Filoni is going to be helming whenever that comes out in the near future, right? I don't know when. We don't know when these films are taking place. They're being very coy about that. I think rightfully so. They don't want to give too much optimism for folks or tie them into a certain date and deadline. I got to imagine this is a moving target date because they don't know when these shows are going to be at a point yet where they want to start filming that movie. You got to imagine they're probably doing some spreadsheet, whiteboard, something like that to get it up and running, which I think will be a lot of fun. I would love to be in those rooms to hear them debate story points, story beats, and plot points, all that stuff. I think that'd be really cool to just be a fly on that wall in that Lucasfilm headquarters story session, just to see where they're mapping this out. But of course, we will get there eventually. So don't delay. Don't worry about it. Time will pass accordingly as it does. Let's live in the present. The living force, as um, Qui-Gon once shared with us. So that's an important thing here too. One of the big things in this season that again we'll sing the praises for is the fact that we got Jedi Kelleran back into the main canon here. Of course, a character that was introduced in the Jedi Temple Challenge TV series, kind of. It was meant to be a TV series, and they released it on YouTube during the pandemic. You can still watch those episodes now, so go check those out if you haven't. I thought they were a lot of fun, and maybe, of course, we'll talk about them on a future episode of Force Ghost Conversations. You never know. I just love that Ahmad Best is in Star Wars more. He went through such a journey with this franchise. I'm glad that I've always loved Jar Jar Binks. I know for many others that wasn't the case, and many have turned their opinions on that around as they've gone to appreciate the character over the years, maybe appreciate where the character stands in the ranks of popular culture, and not necessarily popular culture in one way that you're probably thinking, but I would say in the way of how he, being one of the first very all motion capture characters, etc. Like, you don't get Lord of the Rings, Gollum, and Planet of the Apes, and all the things afterwards, right? You don't get Avatar if you don't have Jar Jar Binks. So there's definitely a wonderful causality that I think we can appreciate about the character overall, even if you don't like the writing of it or the style of it, whatever, right? I do like all that stuff. I think Jar Jar is great. I was a 4 and 5 year old kid watching those movies religiously, and it was everything that I needed it to be. So we all have our different areas where we come to this from. But I'm just glad that, it was a hard journey for him nonetheless, right? He he's very open about it, so you can check that story out online wherever you can. I'm glad that he got his flowers, if you will. I've been hearing this phrase tossed around a lot in regards to um, his performance in the show. I'm very intrigued still about the lingering threads of where he goes with Grogu. What's the deal with the Naboo ship that he goes off in? Is there a connection to Padme? I just have a lot of questions and I want them answered someday, but I'm willing to be patient because I have a feeling John and Dave won't let us hanging on some of those important loose plot threads. So that's just something we'll have to be keeping our eyes and ears close to the ground for. And man, wow, we got some more Order 66 flashbacks this season again. That's where we brought him into play again. If I didn't mention again at the top when I was started the segment on Jedi Master Kelleran Beck, is that he is the person responsible for getting Grogu out of the Jedi Temple the night of Order 66. So very important to how we get to where we're at in the Mandalorian. So I want to know what happens to him. I want to know where his story goes. This is stuff that I think will be very much so at the top of my what's going on with this, what's the deal, questions for season 4 that I hope get answered in some way, shape, or form. Lastly, I guess I just wanted to talk about some action beats in this season. Of course, that big one with the alligator monster was one of the most wild action sequences I can recall. I did love 2 action set pieces, probably the most of this entire season. Well, let's just say the Paz Vizsla, we're going to put that in a Hall of Fame right now. His last stand is both emotionally relevant and the action itself is great. Him fighting the Praetorian Guards, I thought was exquisite. There are two sequences, of course, and this is when the Mandalorian sect first gets to Navarro when they're fighting off the pirates and Gorian Shard and all those remnant groups that we now know were sent by, or at least hired by the Shadow Council of this Imperial Remnant group. And I love that street, house to house, urban fighting that we got from the Mandalorians in that episode. It was very grounded. It was on the ground. Felt kind of like Saving Private Ryan at the last battle sequence when they're fighting in that town, that French town there, where they're protecting the bridge. Thought the influences of that were certainly on display there. And I thought that was great. I thought that was probably some of the best Mandalorian fighting we'll get in this season. But no, it got topped. Rick Famuyiwa delivered brilliantly in the last episode with that season finale, The Return, with all those Mandalorians on jetpacks flying in the sky, fighting against these very, very much so capable Imperial Phase 2 Dark Troopers that are wearing Beskar armor, utilizing the different tactics learned from the Mandalorians that Moff Gideon put into place here. I thought that was a very well done action sequence, which could have looked goofy, right? It was a lot of CG, but the artistry work that they did to put this together to make it look cohesive to me was just astounding. I found myself in my rewatches of the finale episode coming back to that a lot. And I thought, man, this is a great spectacle. I'm looking at you, Galaxy's Edge, Batuu, other experiences in the Star Wars parks or on the ship or something like that. Give me the Mandalorian experience. That's what my final takeaway from this is. I want to be able to put on some Beskar, perhaps put on a jetpack and fly around. Send me to Mandalore. Let's be a part of this climactic battle. Do an offshoot of Star Tours where you get lost on Mandalore and have to put on a jetpack and fly around and get engaged in some climactic battle to save your people, to save your home, to save your culture, your identity. That's what this season was all about, folks. It's about a return home. It's about coming together, putting aside differences, and realizing that we are stronger together. I think those are very big, powerful themes that will continue to linger as we go through the rest of this Mandoverse saga. And I hope that it stays that way. I hope we don't regress from that. I hope they stay together. I hope they continue to grow their ranks to find other Mandalorians that are out there in the galaxy that survived the Purge. I think there's many more out there that they can add to their numbers and continue to grow and be a part of that final battle between the New Republic and the Imperial remnants that we're going to see in this movie. Very excited for it, looking forward to it. What did you think about The Mandalorian Season 3 overall? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you struggle with it? Let's talk about it. Hit us up on all of our social media channels. Of course, we're available at Force Goes Conversations. Just search for that on all the sites: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Hive. We're available on all those, and we're constantly checking that to see if there's any discussion things that we want to talk about or get involved with, etc. So that's where you can contact us for the most part. Again, we have a Patreon now, folks. So if you want to continue supporting the show in other means aside from just subscribing, telling your friends about us, sharing the show on your social media sites, interacting with us, leaving a rating, a review, all that stuff. If you want to support us with other monetary means, of course, there is a link in the episode description where you can find the various tiers and see if there's one that you want. For as little as $1 a month, of course, you can get access to a whole ton of Force Ghost Conversations goodies, which I think are a lot of cool. So find out the tier that you like best and be sure to do that. We also have a TeePublic store where if you want to support the show by literally wearing some of our logo-inspired designs, of course, we have our Willow logo, our Star Wars logo, and our Indiana Jones-inspired logo, which we're going to be going full steam ahead into Dial of Destiny season very soon here. We're going to be talking about each of the Indiana Jones films individually and leading up to the Dial of Destiny. So those are some future episodes to be looking out for. We've got some guests lined up for that. It's going to be a very exciting time here at Force Ghost Conversations. So you want to make sure that you're subscribed, that you're not missing out on an episode. Trust me, it's going to be a lot of fun. So with that, folks, that's all that I had for this week. So, boy, if I didn't close off the loop there, sorry if I did. But we have a TeePublic store where you can buy Force Ghost Conversations related merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, pillows, phone cases, all that stuff. Just go search that. Again, there's a link in the description for you to check that out and to find something that you like. They run deals frequently on TeePublic's site, so be sure to check that out. And of course, some of the proceeds go to supporting the show as well. So with that, folks, that's all that I had for this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. We'll be back, of course, next Sunday with a brand new episode. Maybe we'll talk about Young Jedi Adventures, which premieres on May 4th. Visions Volume 2 also premieres on May 4th. I don't know how we'll be covering those in detail yet, but we will be covering those in detail, so don't be concerned about that. We'll get to all that on Force Ghost Conversations at some point. Maybe we'll talk about Jedi Survivor. Depends how much game playing time I get into this week here, but that's all I had for this week, folks. I hope that you enjoy Star Wars this week. Of course, May the 4th is coming the following week, so be sure to celebrate Star Wars in whatever way that you deem fit for your fandom and the time that you want to commit to celebrating that day. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun for everybody, so be sure to head up all of our social channels to see what we're doing to celebrate Star Wars that day. And again, folks, hope you're having a great time at home. May the Force be with you. Take care.